Hey guys, thanks for joining us here at Salty Ginger Talk. If you're a returning listener, it's great to have you back. If you're new to the channel, really glad you joined us. Hope you like what you hear. So, our guest today is a super interesting and super neat lady. Her name is Hannah Ingram Moore, and she has an absolutely wild story. I'm not going to ruin it by telling you what her story is, but you've got to stay with us from the beginning all the way up to the end of the story because I'm telling you that at the end, she has experienced things that are wild. You will not believe it. So, without further ado, let's bring Hannah onto the channel now. So, Hannah, thank you so much for joining us on Salty Ginger Talk. It's great to have you on the program.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I've been really looking forward to this.
Yes, we had we had an awesome conversation somewhere around a month ago, and I've really been looking forward to your episode since we talked. And so, for those folks that don't know or can't pick up the accent, Hannah is in the UK, and she has uh, an interesting story that turns into a fucking wild story. So, buckle in. We're going to start with the interesting part and work our way towards the fucking wild part. So, I've been really been looking forward to. I've been going over this with you and hearing you kind of bring our listeners all the way through it. So, um, let's start with the interesting part, if you don't mind. If you can just kind of give the listeners kind of your start with your kind of your professional background, because that will kind of lead us through all of those changes that we talked about up to the crazy stuff that happened during and after the pandemic. So, does that work?
It definitely does for me. Shall I crack on?
Yeah, fire away.
Great. So it's a pleasure to be here and honestly a warm hello to all of your listeners. I've been following the Salty Ginger podcast for quite a long time and I love them. I love the fact that they're down and a bit dirty and a bit with it and no holes barred. And some podcasts I think are a bit floaty and iffy and woofy and not this one. And this is why I thought this would be great. And as Joe said, we had a great chat a little while ago. Give you a very quick synopsis of my background. I started off as a young child thinking I could sell things. And so by the time I was about 8, I was making candles and selling them outside our house. And then people would buy them. I thought, well, there's a thing. Maybe I could make something else. So you can see that sort of entrepreneurialism started quite early, fostered by my father primarily. And to give you a little indicator into that, my father was born in 1920. He was in his 50s by the time I was born. He had fought in the Second World War and so came very much through a life of having to reinvent himself all the time. And of course, survive a lot of loss in his life, but also survive a brutal world war. He was based in India. He fought with the Anglo-Indian Army. He was in Burma fighting then the Japanese. So that was his youth. And then, of course, all those years later, my sister and I were born into a world that was the 1970s. And I think the 1970s here were very similar to the 1970s in the US. We were also here fighting in terms of the global scene. I grew up with the intense scrutiny of the battle between the United Kingdom and the IRA. I lived just in the southeast corner of London, so was very aware of that as a young child. I was brought up to bomb check before I would go to school to check for incendiary devices. We had to check our car before we drove into London. So the backdrop of my life was fairly different to the backdrop, say, of my children's lives, although the world is still as tumultuous today as it was then, to be fair. So I
So,
grew up.
Hannah, just
Yeah.
just just real quick for our
Mhm.
listeners, I don't know if you understand what Hannah's saying or not, but the Irish Republican Army, which was a faction of the Irish people that were fighting for independence, Northern Ireland in particular,
Yeah. Mhm.
they were attacking British citizens as terrorists. I mean, they were fucking terrorists. And I'm Irish. I'll go ahead and say it. They were terrorists, but they were killing innocent British people to try to win their independence. So
It was
imagine,
brutal.
yeah, imagine being a school kid and having to check your backpack, your bag, your car, whatever, for a fucking bomb so you didn't die on the way to school. I just want to put a fine point on what Hannah just said. So I'm so sorry for interrupting. I usually don't interrupt, but that one's
No,
so important. I wanted people to understand it. So please continue.
thank you. That's real clarification because you must stop me anytime you think that I'm saying something that doesn't quite resonate. But that was the backdrop of my life. And of course, when I say that to my children, it's really hard, isn't it, to put that across? But before we drove into London, and we weren't far away, maybe 10 miles, 15 miles, we had to go through what was called the Ring of Steel. So we were stopped on our way into London, every single car. And yet, a few years later, as a young adult, I was in a bar in Soho and just leaving with my friends, Soho in London, to go to another bar. We'd made it to the next bar and a nail bomb went off in a rubbish bin, in a trash can, just next to the bar I'd been in. So we lived in that world, a very unstable world, and yet my father, he was he was not mamby-pamby in any way. Does that translate? He wasn't he didn't wrap
He
his
wasn't
arms.
soft.
No,
Yeah.
no.
He wasn't afraid.
No. By the time I was 8, I could change the oil in a car. I could clean out the carburetor, and I could change the spark plugs. My father was from the north of England, and they're considered to be, let's say they consider themselves to have very short arms and deep pockets. So they don't spend money on a lot. And you'll just have to forgive me because we are suffering with, it's nearly 90 degrees in my office, no air conditioning. So I am what they would say, a lady glows, right? We don't sweat, we just glow.
I
So
have
you'll
that
have to
effect
bear
on I have that effect on people, Hannah, for multiple reasons. So it's
that.
probably me.
I'm sure you do. Your lucky wife. What can I say? And, and so look, there is the backdrop of my life with a father, though, who had to reinvent himself. And therefore, I was brought up in a very strict environment, but in one that was about you have one life, you have one chance, and there's nobody here who's going to come along in their white carriage and save you. This is about you standing up and being responsible for yourself, which actually was quite a serious message in comparison to what turned into quite a soft 70s and 80s environment where I suppose children were more mollycoddled, but not us, no. It was very much about you don't rely on anyone but yourself. Ultimately, you're the person you have to look in the mirror at. And all of these life lessons were just, I didn't know them. I didn't know it at the time. Extraordinary. As I went on through life, I did quite well at school, but I was destined to do my own thing. We were brought up to work hard. If you're going to do something, he always said, if you're going to do something, do it right. Do it once and do it right. And if somebody asks you to do something and you're not quite sure how you do it, first of all, you say, yes, of course I can. And then you work out if you can, how you're going to do it later. And on the backdrop of all of that, my mother was 16 years his junior, the most kind, beautiful woman. But she was very anxious. She'd been brought up in a very anxious life. So in many ways, my father wrapped her up and was everything that he told us that we shouldn't be looking for. He was her savior. They adored each other. They had the perfect unity of marriage. So I grew up in a very safe, emotional environment, which I think, lucky me. And so what happened to me as a career, I was in Gibraltar in southern Spain because my parents had a house on the Costa del Sol in southern Spain. And I did some of my college there. And at the time, way back, and this is how old I am, mobile phones here in the UK were sort of this size. But down in southern Spain, they were still this size. And back then, if you weren't a Spanish resident, you were not entitled to a landline phone line. You just couldn't have one unless you'd been there, I think, for 10 years.
You couldn't have a telephone?
No. because
Really?
you're looking back now into the 80s. Remember that Franco was gone by the 60s. There's still
Okay.
hangover in Spain then, and it was pre-European Union. So if you were a foreign national, you were not entitled to a phone line until a period of time had gone. So when mobile phones arrived, cellular phones arrived, the expatriate community grabbed hold of them. And so a friend of mine, the father of a friend of mine, said, look, we've got finally have our landline. Why don't you sell our cellular phone? And whatever you make, give me half. So I sold it. I was still at college. I sold it. And I made a few, well, let's say a few thousand pesetas. And it's euros now. And in the end, he said, keep it. You did a great job. Keep it. So I went, okay. And bought another one. And then with that, after having sold it, I bought a few more. Anyway, long story short, I sold that business when I was still in college to a large cellular company that had moved down to southern Spain.
So,
So,
hang on, I just want to make sure I heard it right. You're a non-citizen in Spain
yes,
in college.
yes,
And yeah, I remember those were military cell phones is what they were.
yes,
They were phones
yes,
that they used to call in bomb strikes when they were out
yes,
in the field. Exactly
yes,
right. And so your friend's dad has one and says, we finally got our landline. And since none of us live in Spain, we couldn't have one until now.
yes.
So you sell it and you turn selling these gigantic prehistoric cell phones into a business. Is that what you just said?
Yes, I mean, but it sounds so much more than it was. But yes, yes, and yes, there's that's a whole other podcast because I'm sure I was doing things I shouldn't have been. But nobody stopped me, and I had a great time doing it, and met some amazing people. But keep in mind, I was 19, 20 maybe, and also I picked up another job whilst I was there. I was selling nighttime radio slots to the expatriates. So when I'd finished at college, I sold phones, and then I drove up and down the Costa del Sol, finding businesses who'd like a radio advertising slot. Um, and at the time, none of that felt very strange, if I'm honest, because my parents were like, "Well, off you go." So off I went. Anyway, so cut a long story short, and we'll compress the following years. I ended up working for big brands. And I suppose they were attracted to me because I had then European experience at quite a young age. And so I worked through what would now be called omni-channel. So retail, wholesale, travel retail, which was really exciting. And I absolutely loved it. Ended up working for a company based in Switzerland, and they dispatched me to the United States. So here I was now into my early 30s, late 20s, early 30s, being dispatched to North America. And I had been to the States a few times as holidays, but I didn't know the country well. But there I was told, you have responsibility for all of the sites that we're giving you across North America, Canada, the Caribbean, and Northern Europe and Southeast Asia. So those obviously came in time. But here suddenly I was managing business that was essentially under the same roof, but different brands in different continents and with different cultures.
I mean, you
Or
were that's across like 16 time zones, what you just listed off.
yes, but exactly. And if you think I would go from London, sometimes into Zurich and then back to London, then from London normally into JFK, Newark, LaGuardia, then I would cross all the way over to the West Coast, over to Hawaii, up and through Canada, right down into the southern states, down into Florida, and then into the Caribbean, and then go back and go into Europe again and back to London. So I was doing about 1 million air miles a year. but absolutely loving my job. But there's a very, I mean, I absolutely loved it. I mean, I loved it more than maybe you should love a job, but I really, really loved it. And as a consequence, things went really well. Because I think, you know, when you know this, if you're good at something and you believe in yourself, because this is along the way, I should tell you there were many people who tried to derail me. And thank goodness for my upbringing. There were times when my knees knocked with fear as people were desperately trying to derail me from my path. Because when you are successful, and let's just say that in this world where we still have a problem with misogyny, we're still distrustful of successful women, and keep that as a backdrop for my later life. But I didn't ever feel that. I didn't ever wear it because I'd been brought up not to get on with it. My father always said, whatever anyone else can do, you can do it better. And that might sound really arrogant, but you kind of need that resilience to believe in yourself. And it was a bit unbecoming for girls and women to say things like that. But I believed I could, and so I did. And
So
people
this was Hannah. This was in the 90s that we're talking
yeah,
about this time frame.
yeah. We're
Yeah,
ending up now. We're now towards the end of the 90s, early 2000s now.
yeah. So let me just for the listeners real quick. So Hannah just talked about misogyny. I'm shocked that there are men out there that are threatened by successful women, but if Hannah says it's so, it must be. Hopefully you're picking up my sarcasm because I'm laying it on very thickly. Yeah, some men are just douchebags, and I can tell you that they're douchebags to men and women, because as I've had success in things, and look, I failed a lot at a lot of stuff as well, so I have a lot of failure in my past. I always say I failed my way to the top, because it's the absolute truth. But I agree with Hannah 100%. When you're successful, it threatens people. It makes them feel, for whatever reason, they look at it as a reflection on themselves. Like, you're doing better than me. I need to tear you down so that I can feel better about myself. And then I agree with you 100%. There's tons of men, especially when a fucking woman is doing better than me. What is this shit? And it's just it's a very uncomfortable and shitty truth, but it is a truth for sure. But what I really want to point out to our listeners is, what is one thing, the one thing you should have noticed already in Hannah's story. We're just getting started, by the way. The good stuff is yet to come, even though this is great stuff and it's fascinating. Is she's taking action. She started taking action. She was 8 years old. She started selling candles in front of her house. And then she sold cell phones while she was at college. And then she took a job that took her all over the world, selling things for brands and companies. And there's action involved. And we talk about it all the time. If you want to make a better life, you've got to do something. And that something will lead you to crazy places. And I'm telling you, you're not going to believe when Hannah finishes the penultimate part of this story. You will not believe it. I've said nothing about it on purpose because I want her to describe it. However, pay attention, because this is a very successful person that's telling you how they did it, and they got up and got after it every day. And I just want to illustrate that point for our listeners. So I apologize. We're in the late 90s, early 2000s, and you're loving your job and things are going well, but you were about to get to the butt.
Yeah, there's a but I also want to say thank you for that, because number one, of course, I'm telling you, I'm speeding through a lot of the success, but there's a lot of tripping up on the way. And there's something I really admire about American culture, and that is the absolute belief that you fail your way to the top. And we don't have that culture here. Failure is seen as something terribly awful and damning and embarrassing. But I wasn't brought up like that. You make a mistake, you trip up, you don't do it again. You recover from it and you move on. And that is a little bit alien to our culture here, which keep that in your mind. But be very proud as Americans of your belief that success comes from failure. How can you be successful if you haven't failed at it a few times on the way? And you should be very, very proud of your cultural ambitions. So coming back to now the early 2000s, there's a first fairly big but in my life here, is that the awful backdrop to my success and love of life, and an absolute belief that nobody was coming to save me ever. Didn't mean I didn't love to have people with me. I love people, I love them. But I didn't believe anyone else was responsible for me, just me, my decisions, my actions. But behind the scenes, my mother, my beautiful, kind, caring, gorgeous and wonderful mother, was dying of dementia. And we had only realized that a few years into the main thrust of my busy working life. And before I had come to America, I was commuting into London every day. And I was on an early train, as you do, all of those who've commuted. Maybe it was 7:15. And my father, who was then in his late 70s, early 80s, he and I would call each other every morning. And he would tell me about how my mother was behaving. And most often, and only those people, I think, who commuted on trains into big cities will understand what this feels like. I'm on a train where the next person to me is here. And the next person to me is here. Then we had newspapers, right? You had to fold up your newspaper to read it because there wasn't enough space to open it. I'm having a phone call with my father who's crying. And my father didn't cry. He was a World War II veteran, a stoic man of the 1920s, crying because he didn't know how to handle or what to do with my mother, who was behaving erratically, and he didn't understand her behavior, and it was really distressing him. I would have those conversations. I would get off the train and go underground in London, and no cellular reception then, there is now, and no air conditioning, there still isn't, into a hot box that would take me to the other side of London, out to my job where I was responsible for lots of people and multi-million dollars of business. And in the backdrop, my mother is slowly beginning to crumble. By the time I was in America, she was now in a home. And so I would fly from New York or Miami or often Los Angeles, all the way back to London. I wouldn't even go home to my husband first. I would get in my car. I would travel all the way around the ring road of London, which is a long way for anyone who knows, and down into Kent, where they were, which is a northern county in the southern part of London, southeastern part of London. I would go first to pick up my father, then to where my mother was. And together we would sit and try and find something that could bring out some happiness of the desperate situation we were in. And then I became pregnant with my first child. So now I'm beginning to have major milestones in my life that my mother's not there for. And my aging father is there for, because he's 16 years older than her. So I have my mother, who's then in her 60s, early 60s, and she's missing the fact that I've conquered the world in my job. You know, I say that, but that's how I wanted to tell her. Mum, listen, I've been here and I've been there and I've done this and I've achieved this, and I couldn't. And then and my father was very proud, don't get me wrong, but how could we celebrate when my mother is dying? So my first milestone, I'm pregnant. I can't ask her anything because she doesn't know who I am. I can't ask her, is this right? Does this feel right? Should this be happening? What will happen at what stage? I'm reading books because I can't ask my mum. But the other thing is, I don't want to tell anyone, because if I tell anyone, then how will they judge me? Because I'm in a world of judgment already. And if I tell them that my other life is piecing together time with my husband, time with my father, and time trying to get the last moments I can forever from my mother, who I adore, who used to wrap her arms around me, even right until the minute she didn't know who she was anymore, and said, you just don't know how much you're loved. All those things, I used to try and remember them because they were gone. She did. I could have been anyone when I arrived. So here I'm beginning to go through those first major milestones without my mother in it. And I'm in my early 30s now. And so life changes again. My husband and I decided that we'd reached a point in life where we both had enough credibility and knowledge to set up our own business. We wanted to change life a bit and try and jokingly, we set up our own business, believing we might have a little bit more time and a little bit more control for all those people who are in their own businesses. How we laugh. We were very naive, and we needed to be naive, I think. So we exited our corporate jobs and started out in our own consultancy businesses. Really sensible thing to do, I say, with a whole layer of sarcasm. Just as we're having our first child and wanting to buy a house, a bigger house. And in the backdrop of this, and now I have a 12-month-old, 16-month-old baby, and my mother dies. So I'm in the first rounds of a consultancy job. I have a young child, and my mother dies. And in that moment, for those people who have gone through dementia, Alzheimer's, I think you call it something slightly different in the States, but let's understand that it's a degenerative brain disease. The brain slowly dies in all corners, and you see as different elements of someone disappears just a little bit more every day. It's every loss is terrible. Every loss is terrible, but living grief is very, very hard. So I've done most of this without really telling anyone at work, because I didn't want that judgment. I'm already now a mother juggling having a baby and then a sick mother. It was just too much for people to take, and I understood that. When she died, it was just a little bit of a relief. But then grief starts all over again. But we live in a brutal world. And really, once the funeral's happened, everyone's ready. So you're back now. Great. So you can fly to Dublin, or you can fly to New York, or you can fly to Taipei. And so life started again. And I think one of the major moments in my life that I realized that I needed to change it. And this comes down to, I think I'd felt a little bit like life was happening to me at this point, feeling like, oh, this is a bit unfair, because now I'm a mother and I have a child and my mother's died, and oh, like, can someone give me a break? And none of that worked for me. It put me in a place where I felt very bad about myself, because I realized I was letting life control me, not for very long, but for long enough for me to grab myself up by my bootstraps and say, get over it, stop it, stop this, because these life events are going to control you if you don't start getting control of them. And it was a moment I was in Taipei, in Taiwan, and I was in a shopping mall at a weekend. And my son then was, he's now nearly 22, but he was about 2 then. And I remember seeing mothers with their 2-year-old boys. That's all I could see. And I knew my mind was playing tricks on me. But okay, I need to stop this. So I did. I changed it. We got hold of ourselves. We decided, right, we need to, if we're going to do this consultancy thing, we can't half do it. So we moved, and we moved house, and we relocated where we could get more space, where we could work from home. And the next big, really how very sensible that was, dripping with sarcasm, is at the end of 2007, just as the world was about to stop in 2008. We sold our house. My father sold his house because we had said, we're moving, come with us, you can't be on your own. So after lots of discussion, he came. So he sold his house. We sold our house, we thought. We had exchanged contracts on the house we currently live in. In this country, buying houses is a nightmare. You exchange contracts and you pay some money, and then you wait an interminable amount of time for the lawyers to do everything. Normally 3 months later, or at least, you move in. But here my father's house had gone through really quickly. We think we've sold our house. We've exchanged on the new, much bigger, more expensive house. And the world starts to stop. The people buying our house said, we can't buy it anymore. So we move into a new house that's roughly 500 years old. And that this is now 2007, beginning of 2008, an old rectory that has had 500 years of life, but stuck in about 1976 with cork boards and green carpet. My father's moved in, he's 87. We have Benji, who's 3, coming up to 4, and I'm about to be pregnant with our next child. And we have 2 houses. And all the banks, starting with Lehman Brothers, start to collapse. The financial world starts to collapse. We've set up a new business. So here we are. I'm pregnant. We have 2 houses, one that we've never been to, one that we're having to remodel to live in, with my father moving into it, a young child and a baby. And all the banks have stopped lending any money. They're not investing in any businesses. It was absolutely dreadful. Absolutely dreadful. We were living in a world, and maybe some of your listeners will remember this, and maybe some won't, but the global financial world was on its knees. Governments were rocked. And here we are with 2 houses, an old man, 2 young children, and a fledgling business. It was diabolical, but here's what ultimately saved us. It was psychologically we were saved. Because as my husband and I sat round our kitchen table, if it had just been him and me, probably we'd have cut our losses and walked away and said, this will all have to crumble and we'll start again. But here around this table, we had an old man who'd sold his house. He didn't put money into our house, but obviously all the time the money's in the bank, not paying him any interest. He's not gaining anything. We have eyes of an old man and eyes of young children. We can't walk away. We have to make this work. So we dug and we used our fingernails, and we were down on our hands and knees doing whatever we could to salvage something out of our position. It took us years to do that, but we did. We did by believing that we could. And it meant that we were working early hours, late nights, all weekends, whatever we needed to do, because we knew we were responsible for those people around our kitchen table and nobody else was. And so we ended up fighting our way through. And guess what happened? We were living this amazing multi-generational life. Around the table, we had this thing that businesses would have just paid us for it if they'd realized, and if we'd even realized what we had, this reciprocal mentoring suddenly happening up and down our table seamlessly, with my father mentoring my children in front of my eyes, with my children reverse mentoring my father in front of my eyes. Granddad, my cricket bat's broken. Come on, I'll show you how to fix it. My father would say, Benji, Georgia, the app's fallen off my iPad. Can you show me how to fix it? The weather's gone. And so this happened. My father could cook. So he then, when I was scrabbling all over the country trying to salvage our business, was teaching my children life skills. And they were teaching him life skills. So by the time he got into his 90s, he had an iPhone, an iPad, he had apps on his TV, he had a smart TV. He was completely engaged in modern life. And I would sometimes come home and think, oh my goodness, we might not have a lot, but what we've got is magic. I go into his room, and it's a very old house, so the windows are very low down. The windows would be open because it'd be spring or summer, and I'd be sitting next to him catching up. And in through the window would come a child, and mine, and then there would be a dog, mine, and then there'd be a child, not mine, and then another dog and another child, not mine, and they'd fly through my father's room. Hello, Tom. Hello, Grandad. And I thought, oh, look what we've got. Look what we've got. We've got something that was given up. This has been moved on. People gave this up. This ability to live together and thrive, even in the darkest times, thrive. And it was through that our business not only survived, but thrived. And here we were living and growing together as a family in complete obscurity. Nobody really knew who we were, but that was good, right? Because we were just cracking on. In our worlds that we lived in, we were known, business-wise, we were known, in our community, we were known, but that was the extent of it. Of course, I have global network because I've worked a lot overseas, but beyond that, invisible. And we got to 2018, which was, in the words of our late queen, our annus horribilis, because we thought life was good and couldn't get much better. And I was on a bus going into London to one of my, by now I've got clients in London, to one of my clients. And my son then would have been 14, phones me. Hi, Benji, why are you calling? You should be going to school. Granddad's fallen. And by then my father was 98. So he did fall. Old people do fall. Right, listen, I've fallen down the stairs sometimes. It happens if you're running and doing too much. But what I've learned later by studying aging is that your feet are the most important thing. And once you lose stability, people age really quickly. But my father has
Falling,
got
yeah, the falling part, like most people don't understand that. Like when
no.
a fall starts to happen, it is the beginning of a really rough period that's about to happen. It just is.
Yeah, and this would make another great podcast for us, talking about aging, because I am aging. We all are aging, and we live in aging societies. Our
Yeah.
populations are aging, and yet we don't talk about it. So my father was very stable, but his feet were beginning to trouble him. He tripped emptying the dishwasher, 98, emptying the dishwasher. Take note, everybody. But he tripped as he was emptying it. And so I said to Benji on the bus, the number 973 bus going to Tottenham Court Road, and he said, no, but he's really fallen this time and he's really hurt himself and he can't get back up. Is Dad there? Yes. So phone me back. So he phones me back. They've called an ambulance. It must be bad. And you need to come home. He's asking for you. So I get off the bus. I go into my office to everyone who's waiting for me. And I'm a much braver person now at my age at this point, and able to say, I have a problem at home. My father's fallen. I'm so sorry. And we have mobile phones. You can call me. I need to go back. I'll be in touch. I go straight back to our local hospital. And my father is, I swap shifts. My husband leaves. I join. My children have gone to school. My father's in a bad way. He's 98. And I have to help him in ways that I know he found very difficult. It was very personal, and I could see his discomfort at needing my help. And so I knew then, as his daughter, I had to say to him, it doesn't matter. I have no judgment of what you need from me. You have from me whatever you need, and I'm not judging. And he needed me to hear that. I'm not embarrassed, so don't be embarrassed for yourself. It's okay to have pride, but don't let the pride get in the way of me helping you. So he was taken up to the ward, and I realized when I went back later, his voice had started to change, and I thought it was the morphine. They were pumping him full of morphine. By the time I went back later, he'd turned into, you'll have to look this up for your listeners, but Michelin man, like Michelin tires. There used to be this big man that stood on the top of a Michelin tire. He looked like that, like someone had pumped him full of air. And his voice was squeaking. And so I asked for a consultant, like, this isn't how my father should look. He's really slight. He's really slight. And I showed them a picture. I said, this is not him. He's tiny. He's slim. So it turned out that when he'd fallen and he'd fractured his hip, he'd also broken a rib and punctured a lung. And he's had, and again, your listeners will correct me, subcutaneous emphysema, where the oxygen was going into the just below his skin layer, and it was gradually strangling him. So I believed that my father at 98, who was being now wheeled off for a lumbar puncture, no anesthetic for that, to try and save him, probably wouldn't live. So I'm preparing myself. Okay, second loss coming. It's okay. Prepare my children. It's okay. To cut a long story short, he lived because he was determined to live. And do you know why he was determined to live? Because he had purpose. He had purpose. He had belief. He knew that we needed him. We knew that we needed him to come back. He knew that when he came back, he would have as much purpose as when he left. And purpose is everything in life. Once we start to lose purpose, we start to lose hope. And we need purpose. If you look at people who are living on our streets, it's this terrible, sad tragedy that we have people who are living on our streets. And I know that you have a problem too. But this is when people believe they have no purpose in life, that they have no role to play. And once that happens, you start to believe that there's any function for yourself or any hope. And that is the opposite of what my father had. He had absolute belief, because I kept saying, I always said to him, you can't die. Please don't die, because I'd have to hire 3 people to do all the jobs you do. So we joke and laugh. But he said to me one day, you know, Hannah, what you've done? When you get old, people stop seeing you. We become invisible to the world. And by living with you, it's the best thing I ever did, because now you've given me my visibility back. People see me. And so here's a 98-year-old man who was being seen. And so he had every reason to get better. He came back. He came back a slightly diminished, physically able man, but he came back nonetheless. Whilst he was away, we fitted steps and rails and ramps and stair lifts and hospital. The people who, I've forgotten what they're called, they come and help you make the house right for the person who needs help. Had said, well, why don't you just put his bed downstairs and give him a commode? I'm like, no, those things are not happening. He's going to go back to his bedroom, and he's going to have all the facilities to get him back to his bedroom. We're not downsizing his life. And so he came back and he lived. And keep that story in your mind, because as we rolled into the back end of 2018, my father was home rehabilitating. My husband and I had decided to go out for lunch. I was writing a board report for one of my clients. It was a Friday. And I said, oh, I've got to get it in. I need to do it now. Otherwise, it's going to hang over me all weekend. And he went, come out, let's go out for lunch. You have a glass of wine. You'll be able to write it faster. So we were joking about that. And also the thing that we did up until the pandemic is open our garden every year for the local church fete. Because when we first moved here, the church was holding their fete in the graveyard, because this house used to belong to the church. And so I said, oh, come have the fete in our garden. Like, it makes sense. So for 10 years, we've been raising money for the church in our garden. That fete was due to happen the next day for this lunch that my husband and children were at school. I think maybe they were at night stops or something. And so we had one of those lunches where we started to think, oh, next life might be coming. My father's okay. He's 98. The children are growing up. Benji's about to come to his latter part of school. And Georgia, the youngest, well, she'd live anywhere. So, hey, maybe there's the next chance of life to come. Dreaming, having a lovely time, having lunch, drinking wine, came back. All the marquees were going up in our garden. My husband, notoriously becoming absent at that point, went inside. And I started.
You can always count on us men, Anna.
Yes. Look, we all play to our strengths, right? I'm not judging. So not his strength, moving on to other strengths. But anyway, so some of my friends were there helping, and I said, girls, it's time for wine. Come on, the weather's lovely. Let's go and open a bottle of wine. So we're sipping a little wine. The marquees are all up. The kids are all playing. And Benji, eldest, came down and said, Dad needs you. And if I'm really honest, this is what I did. Really? Does he though? Does he? Yeah, he's complaining. I said, maybe he's got indigestion. Maybe the fish was off. Tell him to take a Bistadol, a Rene, whatever you call them, Peptal, whatever you call them, the stomach things. Tell him to take one of those and let me know if he's not feeling good anymore. And so Benji dutifully went off and passed on the message. And then he said, no, Mum, it's worse. He needs you. So I went up to the bedroom. My husband is lying there, bellowing like a bear. And I said, oh my God, what's wrong with you? And he couldn't speak. I mean, he'd gone from functioning to non-functioning, rivers of sweat rolling off him. So I'm like, oh, okay. Do you need me to call an ambulance? He couldn't speak to me. So I call an ambulance. And they said to me, is the things they normally say, is he breathing? I said, yes, definitely breathing, but not talking at all. But I'm still thinking, it's the fish. You know what fish can do to people. So at this point, I've got the ambulance under my ear and I go downstairs and say, girls, I think I'm gonna have to call it. I'm so sorry. But husband being very needy. So off they went. And I said to one of them, would you mind taking Georgia just for now? Because ambulance is coming and Georgia was only 9. So could you take her? Because I'm not sure where this is going to go. Benji, 14, 13, 14, can stay with me. So they all went. Ambulance arrives. And even the paramedics sort of arrived going, because I'd gone, well, we've been out for lunch. I think it might be that. Don't panic. And they kind of went, no. So they walked upstairs, tried to get the sticky things on, wouldn't stay on. Realized that he was beginning to slide. I'm like, what do you mean he's beginning to slide? We need to get him outside. We need to get him outside and into the ambulance. We've now got a super paramedic here. And we get him outside onto a trolley. They had him held on our driveway for 45 minutes before they were prepared to move him. I still have no idea what the problem is. So me, not a panicker, right? I'm not. You give me anything. I'm your reliable kind of girl. So if you ever need a crisis, call me. Because I'm going, well, I'm sure it'll be all right. So we followed the ambulance. And he goes into A&E. My husband goes directly into A&E, past a few coppers, a few policemen who'd obviously been a bit of a bust up. There's children crying, people sobbing, people moaning. We go straight past them into A&E, which is rare here because we normally have a big queue in our accident and emergency rooms. And Benji and I sit next to him, and within about, they've given him morphine because he's in acute pain. In front of us, my husband arrests. He stops breathing, fits, eyes rolled into the back of his head. And we call and they exit us into a small room. And I think, oh my God, my husband's dying. He's going to die. I've got Benji here who said, is Dad going to die? And I went, no, of course not. It's going to be fine. And at that moment, one of the doctors brings me my husband's bag of things that I brought. I'm like, oh no, he's dead. So I say, everything all right? And the guy said, doctor, don't worry, we've got 20 people working on him. I go, okay, we brought him back. We think we have him stabilized. So at this point, my 14-year-old starts to shake violently and have a nosebleed. And the first things that came out of his mouth, he said, is Dad dead? Dad is dead. I said, no, he's not. He said, what's going to happen? Will we be able to stay in the house? Can I keep going to that school? Who's going to watch me play cricket? Actually, do you know what I thought at that moment in time? What do you mean who's going to watch you play cricket? I come to watch you play cricket all the time. That was my rationale to go, what do you mean? Are you assuming? But of course, that's not what he meant. So I had to wind myself in. And so I went, no, Benji, everything's fine. Nothing is going to change. Nothing is going to change. It's all fine. As I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm a widow. I am in my 40s and I'm a widow. So they come back, so I now have Benji, who is now just has a permanent nosebleed, is in shock. we walk back past the police, who one of them starts to cry immediately seeing Benji because he looks like he's lost. So I'm trying to hold our life together as I go back to see my husband, who's only mildly conscious. But here's the thing, in the back of my mind, I know that we're opening our garden to 500 people in just a few hours, because we've been there hours now. So we're getting to be about, I don't know, 11 o'clock midnight. So I'm messaging my friend who has my daughter and say, do you mind holding on to Georgia just for now? Could she sleep over? Because I think I might be a bit of time. And she says, yes, of course, no problem. I said, it's fine. Colin stopped breathing, but I think we're good now. And she's like, holy, what do you mean he's stopped breathing? I mean, it's fine, Lou, it's all right. So then I go to see the matron, and I think it's rolling to about 3 o'clock now in the morning. They're about to take my husband to a ward. And I say to her, look, I'm really sorry. Whichever way I say this, it's going to sound really bad. I know it is, but I'm just going to say how it is. In 6 hours, I have 500 people arriving at my house. Can I go? Or should I stay? Because is he going to die? And I just need you to put me straight. I need someone to tell me. Because if he's going to die, of course I won't go. And I'm going to tell the 500 people to go away somehow. So she says, no, I think you can go. We'll call you. I'm like, okay. So he's stable enough for me to go, right? She said, for now he is. So I get in the car. I drive in the middle of the night back to our house. I'm by WhatsApp, via my son being my PA, cancelling a tennis tournament that my daughter was in, saying, sorry, I don't think she's going to go to that tennis tournament because I'm not going to be back. I get home. I phone the hospital. He's stable. Please don't call us. We're busy. So the fate happens. And I walk around like my father's desperately worried because Colin's in hospital. But you know what the funniest thing of all of this is? When the fate opened, someone came up to me and said, Tom, we saw ambulances yesterday. Are you all right? And he went, bloody cheek, thinking I'm the one that's ill. And and you've got to see the humor in all of it, because I'm going to fast forward that my husband nearly died 4 times of sepsis over the following weeks. But as we came to the end of that year, he came home. And he came home well enough anyway. And we had several close calls and it tested me. It tested me to the end. But I knew that.
Do they know what caused the sepsis? Did they ever figure that out?
Yeah, he had a gangrenous gallbladder. But they couldn't take it out in case he went into total septic shock. So they had to wait, and eventually they took it out through keyhole surgery. So there's a whole other story.
The problem with sepsis too, for those, like, there's nothing you can do for sepsis. They pump you full of antibiotics and cross their fingers. Like, there is no treatment for it. It's brutal.
No, it's brutal, and several times it nearly beat him. I was once in the hospital and they took me to one side and said, your husband's gone down to A&E. We're not actually sure he's coming out. And that day I cried all the way home, thinking, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? But I had to find it. And you find places in yourself, because I had prepared myself to be a single parent with an elderly man in my house. I prepared myself. So in the end, that didn't happen. My husband came home. And so we rolled into 2019. And I'm sorry it's taken so long to get here, but it was important as the backdrop. We get to 2019 and think, hooray, everyone's fine. We're good. The world's back to a normal place. Business is back on an even keel. Everyone's fit and healthy. And we rebuild through 2019 and we're happy. I win a big contract just in the last quarter of 2019. Yes, I knew it. And I said to my team, let's say this is in December 2019, January, maybe just as we hit January 2020. I've got this feeling something big is going to happen. And they're like, you and your feelings, you're like, because they call me witchy. I'm always thinking I can feel it coming. And I said, something's going to happen. And I just know the thing that's going to happen is going to be global. And they're like, well, only if we wished that you're going to do something that creates this global thing. And I'm like, yeah, maybe I've got it wrong, but I just feel it. And I said, you know, it's going to be something that is also quite heavily involving the United States. I just feel it. So anyway, we all know what happened. We went cozily into the early part of 2020, and we got to March. And I think you locked down on the East Coast just a little bit more than a little bit earlier than we did in the United Kingdom. And we had a rumbling from a friend of ours who's got a connection in government. And they said, beware, there's a lockdown coming. We're like, don't be ridiculous. We live in a democracy. You can't lock us down. And they said, stand by. It's coming.
You can if you're scared. You can if you're scared. You can if
Yeah.
people are sheep and you scare them, then they'll do anything.
Then they'll do anything. And wow, that is, and I would love to do this again and talk about how we behave. So here we're being told, oh, a lockdown's coming. But honestly, we live in a great democracy. They don't lock us down. Don't be silly. So then we heard this first element of lockdown that seemed not too bad. They were closing a few things, but it was going to be for 3 weeks, so it's fine, whilst we get to grips with this thing called COVID-19. And that was on the Friday. By the Monday, they put us in a full lockdown. We were stunned and had no idea what we were going to do with it. But we were kind of cozily being told that it was going to be 3 weeks at this point. So we sort of all went, oh, well, I suppose we'll get on with it. But here's the thing, we've got our own business. And so we were having weekly updates from our government on a Saturday, I think. Well, it almost is now, but let's call it that. We were on, say, the second weekend of lockdown with the beginning of the rumble that it might be more than 3 weeks. And so my husband and I sat outside, honestly saying, hell's bells, like, what are we going to do? Like, how long have we got? Really and truly, there's no safety net here. How long will it be before we can't pay our people? Because honestly, there comes a point where we have to pay our mortgage before we pay them.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got to live. How long? And we had a really nuts and bolts conversation about it and said, well, we probably had 6 months, which was better than some and worse than others, and kind of called it quits. But also, I don't know if this was the same with you, but we had a terrible run on toilet roll in this country, and no one could get toilet roll. But I'm a planner, me. I like to have, I was always taught with anything, you're using one, you've got one in stock and you've got one ordered, right? So I'm a planner. I've got toilet roll. And so I'm beginning to give toilet roll out through the village, being mindful that we don't run out ourselves. And we have a cellar and we've got wine in it. So we sort of giggled and went, well, it could be worse. At least we've got toilet roll and wine. And so the kids came out in the way that kids do, going, we're hungry, what's for lunch? And so I went, oh, get some burgers and sausages, stick it on the barbecue. Like, it's warm. It was really warm that year. And then remember the wine, because we are a little bit going, well, what else is there to do? Eat and drink. And so my father came out for one of the first times that spring to rehabilitate. He was rehabilitating outside with a walker. And my husband said, well, Tom, since we can't hold your 100th birthday, because we were planning a big 100th birthday for him, with music and food and everything cancelled. So I tell you what, Tom, we'll give you £1 a lap if you walk up and down 100 times before your 100th birthday, just to keep you inspired. And then we'll just have a quiet birthday, just us. And my father, in true northern spirit, as we say here, Yorkshire spirit, all right then, it's a deal. So, okay, we think, well, we're going to raise £100. Well, we have to give it away. So I said to the family team, well, we can't keep it. There's no point suggesting we're going to give him £1 a lap and then keep it. So we need to give it away. And so let's give it something. What do we think? Something that supports the National Health Service here in the United Kingdom, because there was no PPE, there was no this, there was no that. It was all a nightmare. Let's raise some money and help the nurses and the doctors in the NHS. So we went, okay. So I said to my father, we need to call you something. We'll call you Captain Tom. And he said, no, but you can't. I retired in 1945. And I remember saying to him, but I tell you what, we'll do it. And if the army doesn't like it, I'm sure they'll tell us. So wrote a bit of a press release. And I say this in the loosest form of, I'm a communicator. I love people and I love communicating. But I wrote a bit of support Captain Tom and walking for the NHS. The kids said, well, we'll do an iMovie, and got hundreds of people to say, support Captain Tom walking for the NHS. A friend of ours had connections with local radio, sent it out to them. Honestly, didn't think anyone would notice, didn't think anyone would even look at it. I'm going to whizzle through this because it will take a time. But within a week of that small, unconstructed, nothing of a press release, within a week, we had raised £500,000. And the whole world had started to watch Captain Tom walking laps of our garden. And we set up a Twitter account. And because I thought, well, set up a Twitter account, then people will stop asking for photographs. And no, what happened is he got like 1 million followers in days and was trending on Twitter globally. We had nominated NHS Charities Together, which is a charity that gives money to the NHS. And people around the world were donating. But let's be honest, they weren't donating for our NHS. They were donating because my father was giving them hope during the darkest times of the pandemic. And so he and I would do about 30 interviews a day around the world. And to the point where we had to cut his day back because he was tired and nearly 100. So suddenly the kids are having to do, like, you can only work a man so hard, you know. The kids are having to do interviews. We're doing interviews. We're doing Good Morning Australia at midnight, going to bed, waking up, doing Good Morning Britain, and then Good Morning America. And we're traveling around every corner of the globe. People from 162 countries donated. And to put that in context, there are only 195. And I'll be a little not politically correct here. That depends which ones Russia and China are claiming. But let's say roughly that many countries donated. And so we realized everything else in our life stopped. The worry about our own lives, our business got put on hold because we realized the only thing that was important is that my father's message of hope in these darkest times, with governments around the world acting peculiarly, with us talking to countries in South America where they would weep as we came into the back part of being on air. They'd check sound and vision, and the technicians behind would be crying. And my father, profoundly deaf, which is why I sat next to him, would say to me afterwards, why were they crying? And because he missed all the nuances, right? And he didn't really understand the power that he had. Because they would say to us, our governments, they're not capable. We see people dying on the street in Europe. And we know our governments are not capable of holding up our economies. And we're crying because we know what's coming. And we're crying with gratitude for Captain Tom. Because when we see him, he gives us something that we're not getting anywhere else. So the magnitude of responsibility sitting on my family's shoulders was profound. In just under 4 weeks, we had raised £38.9 million, which was just extraordinary.
Just say that again one more time to make sure nobody missed it.
In just less than 4 weeks, we had raised £38 £5.9 million.
So this guy told you guys this is nuts. That's why I was trying to let you know what was coming. But this goes from hey, why don't you take a walk and we'll give you £100 since we can't do your birthday, to a global phenomenon during one of the most significant events in world history in less than 4 weeks, and it started in your garden.
It did, and it did, and even now, we have to pinch ourselves because suddenly he'd be, my father would be FaceTiming with heads of states, with leaders of global businesses. He became the man of the moment, and our lives changed in a way that is irreversible. Because of course we all went with him. Phenomenally, he was knighted by the Queen, our late Queen, he and she were very similar in age, had been through very similar things in their lives, obviously poles apart, but someone that he respected deeply. And he was the last single investiture, knighthood, that she did in her lifetime, him. And did it in Windsor Castle, in the grounds of Windsor Castle. So some just life-stopping, breath-stopping moments that happened. And it was my father and my family and my house, and we didn't mean to do it, but we did. And there were people who said, and who said quite quickly, anyone could have done that. And I had to stop myself from saying the wrong thing, because I realized that here we are, we've done something profoundly successful, and it makes some people uncomfortable, and we didn't mean to do that either. We just, gosh, it took our lives away. We went through genuine hardships, making all of that happen, and it happened because we did have a clue. Like, we understand communication, we understand brand. None of this was in our minds, by the way. We weren't thinking it. We just naturally fell into roles. And there was a moment where I would be live on TV with my father, and my husband would stand behind the camera with a sign saying, "You're late, CNN waiting." But I'm live on a program going somewhere else. So all I can do is continue to smile down the lens of the camera. And he's saying, "Now very late," getting angry. And I can do nothing. So there are some belly laughing moments where you'll see me running through the house, being mic'd to one television company, whilst the other one's waiting for me, with my father coming at a steady pace because he's nearly 100, and the world is waiting to talk to him. So there's barely laughing moments, but also some moments where our family, we put our life on hold to do this. We did it for love. We did it for everybody else. We felt a huge responsibility to continue doing what we did because people needed him. And so it was magic. And the very last full year of his life was simply extraordinary. And so at the end of an extraordinary life that started unremarkably, then went into a life serving his country, and at the very end served a global population in the darkest of its hours. And our lives would never be the same again. And when my father sadly died, tragically of COVID, that he caught in hospital when he'd gone in, because we didn't realize that he had silent pneumonia, and caught COVID, and that, once you're 100 and you have pneumonia, COVID was going to be the end. So we had to think about how we were going to tell all the people in the world who thought my father would come out of hospital, and how we would communicate. So suddenly all those moments in my life that should have been personal grief and for our family turned into very public moments. And when my father's death was announced on television, it was announced to the world by BBC World. And when it was my father's funeral, we were followed by helicopter all the way to the crematorium, and the entire service was filmed on live television. So our lives changed in a way that can never be unchanged. And so we had to all grapple with what life was now. And I'll draw this to an end, so because I'd love to hear your thoughts. But the world knows about the British press. I think they have a reputation globally. And in this country, and this is a very British thing, we love a hero, but we can't really have a hero without a villain. That's part of our culture. And unlike America, where you believe that success comes from failure and from working really hard and from ambition and using all your resources, and you congratulate success in America in a way that we don't really hear. We struggle with it. It's a bit of a dirty word to be overtly successful. And so once my father had died, the British press turned, and they did everything they could to see if they could find a way to make it look like I wasn't quite the wholesome person that I had appeared to be. And someone astutely said to me, the thing is, Hannah, I think we all thought you were making Victoria sponge cakes and looking after your father. And so I sat back and listened to that and went, I do make a very good Victoria sponge cake, actually. But why can't I be commercially successful? Why can't I be the backdrop of this phenomenon that was a philanthropic phenomenon? Someone in America coined it the world's greatest viral lightning strike. And I think that's true. But in this country, we struggle to have those things. And where you've got people saying, but anyone could have done that. And so I decided that my only response to that was, they absolutely could. And you're absolutely right. Anyone could have done that. So I've grappled with facing things written about me that are absolutely not true. I have grappled with stories written because I make great clickbait, and we love to hate. And it's especially true that we are suspicious of successful women. I think that success breeds terrible things in people, whether you're male or female, but it's particularly acidic. Remember, we were only dunking witches a couple of 100 years ago. And so I was, in the modern way, dunked. Because if I survived, you see, she is a witch. And if I died and gone down, they go, oh, look, we didn't mean it. And so I made a decision through those dark times of things being written about me that are so brutally untrue, that I had to let them. Because the good people are the good people, and most people, the vast majority of people, are sensible and know that this is just a twist of the truth. And most people are good. And I have many people saying to me, oh, we don't believe any of that. Don't be ridiculous. We know it's the press. But nonetheless, I had to find it in myself not to collapse, because I had to look around me and realize if I collapsed, everybody would collapse. Like my husband, my children, they need me to know that I can handle it. So I have really worked hard, because it would have been so easy to become a victim. And there was a moment or two there, I've got to admit, when I would be driving down the road and I'd cry all the way in my car, feeling so very sorry, and outraged. How could this happen to me? Why would people say those things? And I'd look at the newspaper and there'd be my face again and an article that wasn't true, and realized that I was making myself ill, not only mentally ill, but physically ill. And that the only person who could stop that was me. Because unless I did, I was going to take everyone with me. Because let's remember, we did raise £38.9 million in just less than 4 weeks. And whatever they can say, they can't take that away. And I know the truth, and the good people know the truth, and they know that I'm just used to sell newspapers. But it took me a while. But now I really firmly believe, and this is the great, I really hope this gives your listeners fortitude and strength, that in the end, you have to believe in yourself. No one else, you. Believe in yourself. And if people say things about you, it is a much, much bigger reflection on them than it is of you. It's them looking in the mirror and not looking at you. You need to let them get on with it. Let them say those things, because you cannot control how they think about you. You cannot control the emotions they have about you. You need to let them get on with it and make peace and believe. Ultimately, being a victim doesn't get you anywhere at all. All that will happen is those other people will win and you'll stop achieving. You have to stop being a victim. It's not good for you. It's not a nice look either. What I also realized is that if people met me and I said, oh, it's just awful, there's been another terrible headline and I feel terrible. Ew, who wants to be around someone who's feeling sorry for themselves? It's very unattractive. So I really truly believe if you get nothing from this other than a few laughs and maybe some sorrow somewhere, some appreciation of some of the things I've gone through in life, please take this, that we owe ourselves the responsibility of being responsible for ourselves, not being victims, letting other people get on with it, and looking after those nearest and dearest, because that's what's most important. And that's, I suppose, the moral of my story is that resilience is down to us. It's not a God-given right. It's not something we either have or we haven't. We can be resilient if we choose to be. We can choose not to be victims, and we can choose to be successful, and we can choose to be happy, because nobody else has that responsibility. We are responsible for our own happiness. And honestly, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm ridiculously happy. Actually, much more happy than I probably should be. But I feel joy. I do. I hope I can push that through the screen. I feel joy. I feel joy. I feel joy for moments like this when I talk to amazing audiences and amazing hosts. I feel joy that we have so much opportunity in our lives. And I feel yet that there's so much I haven't done. And so here I am, delighted to be here. As I'm just looking at our temperature here, it's 9:30 here in the evening, and it's still 90 degrees with no air conditioning. So please have some sympathy for me.
That is an amazing, amazing story. And I thank you so much for sharing it. You have such a captivating way of storytelling. It was enthralling. I don't know if you know, but we're about an hour and a half in, somewhere around there. And it feels like 10 minutes. And I just really appreciate you coming on and sharing it with our audience. And you're right, I've got tons of questions, but I interjected a couple of times, but I wanted you to have the floor to tell kind of the whole thing from start to finish. And I love how you start from being a young girl and working your way up, because it's all of those lessons that you've learned through life that put you in a position to handle these crazy big things that happen to you later in life, starting with your dad falling and breaking his hip and having to go through that whole recovery process, and your husband nearly dying of sepsis and going through that whole recovery process, starting a business and having, this chain of events around real estate. And by the way, the real estate thing is the same everywhere. It's a gigantic pain in the ass, no
Oh,
matter where
it's
you buy real
awful.
estate.
Terrible. Why do they make it so difficult? Anyway, that's another podcast.
Yeah, well, and you've said it, so we'll absolutely have another conversation. We can talk about other stuff, because there is tons of things for us to talk about. I completely agree with your take on the whole COVID situation and people's reaction to it, and we can have a podcast just on that.
Yeah.
We could talk for a couple hours about that. But getting back to your story, um, what do you think the biggest life event was that prepared you for this craziness that happened when your dad went viral across the world and blew up? Because you have all sorts of challenges that happened before then. What do you think? Would you draw from the most during that period, do you think?
I think I thought that might be hard to answer, but I don't think it is. I think there were moments as my mother was dying, and I would be on planes, and I was on planes a lot just after 9/11, and no one else was on them, understandably. And so I'd be on my own a lot on planes with no one around me, and it felt like a safe space to cry, because I was so controlling the loss of my mother everywhere else. Didn't want to cry in front of my father. I didn't want to cry in front of anybody. And so those moments where I felt so very much alone, really alone, but knowing that I had responsibilities. I'd land where I was going. And I'm going to take a moment that's American, because America has a very, very warm place in my heart. I'd land into New York, shower, change, go to the office, and I'd be greeted like they'd been waiting for me. And I loved my team. In fact, I'm just going to go on a little stride. My daughter, who is coming up for 17, is about to fly to Philadelphia to spend 3 weeks with with the family of one of the people I used to work with when I was in the States. So there you go. Talk about hands crossing across the Atlantic.
Mm.
And so those formulating those relationships when I was there, and and they weren't judging me because they didn't really know what was happening in my life. They greeted me as Hannah, who could solve their problems, who could work with them, who could engage with them. Like I saw each of those people as their own individuals striving towards a central goal, but I knew each of them, each individually, what motivated them. It's something I know I do well, and I love doing it. So I think those moments of total isolation where I felt so desperately alone and said, why is it that I'm losing my mother? I like her, I love her. So many people say they don't even get on with theirs, and I'm losing mine. What was that for? And so I'd already had to grapple a lot with outrage, with anger, with those things. I'd come to terms with them that actually it's life, and no one said it was going to be pretty. So I had grappled with that, and I think it really readied me for those moments that came, because someone said to me, you were pre-outraged, you were pre-disastered. And maybe it's a good way of putting it, right? That so many things had happened in my life that it wasn't a shock. I mean, actually, it was an enormous shock when we realized the whole world was watching. But I
Mm.
think that's probably what readied me.
Well, I really appreciate the kind words about the podcast. And I would just add that when you talk about us attracting high caliber guests, present company certainly included. And that makes it really easy to just kind of cede the floor and listen when you've got such captivating people with such interesting stories. Um, and it's one of the things I learned a long time ago, because I needed to. I think I told you this when we talked the first time, but it's too bad you didn't know me when I was 20, because I was so fucking smart when I was 20. I knew everything. And you didn't have to ask me. I would have told you how smart I was. I would volunteer it at that point in my life. And as I've gotten older, I've gotten a lot dumber. It turns out I don't know a goddamn thing. And there's plenty of people that know a lot more than me, and they'll give me all this information if I just ask them a couple of questions and shut my mouth. But we see common themes over and over and over again in the people that come onto our podcast. And everybody's challenges and problems are big and important as it relates to their life. With that said, there's been some people that just like some of it, you're like, oh my gosh, that had to be so difficult. We have folks that were the victims of rape and incest under the age of 5, and folks that have
Oh,
lost teenage children to car accidents and drug overdoses, and just really tough things.
yeah.
And I always find it very humbling, and I take the responsibility very seriously to have a legitimately productive conversation with people that are willing to be so kind of raw and open. on our podcast. That's a very long-winded way of me getting around to one of the themes we see over and over and over again is focusing on other people. And I love how you've talked, even as a young girl, recognizing the value that your father brought into your life. And then even your story about creating your cell phone business. And maybe I'm romanticizing what it actually was, but whatever, cell phone arbitrage, whatever you want to call it. Um, your friend and your friend's dad, you gave credit to them. And then even as you're building this crazy successful career that took you all over the world and working with gigantic companies, your roots are with your mom who's suffering from dementia and your dad and helping him through that. And I love how you talk about that. And it's not just for the listeners, it's not an accident that Hannah has been so successful because even with all the professional success and experience she had, if you paid attention, it was always rooted in relationships and experiences, which is what's truly important in life. And it'd be really easy when you're jetting all over the world and doing all these high level things to lose sight of that. And I just really appreciate and respect the fact that you never did. How do you and your husband keep family at the center of your life, especially when you have all this crazy stuff going on? How did you do it?
It became the most important thing in the whole world, as if that wasn't already important, because we operated as a unit of five, really. We were like team. We consider ourselves team. In many ways, I suppose I took what I hope to be the very best of American culture, because I have so much love and so much appreciation for the for the I can do, we will be successful, we can be spirit of the American culture, that and that idea of team, and not to be embarrassed by it. We're a little bit embarrassed of all of that here, and I'm not embarrassed. I love the fact that we were team, and as things as we became globally seen, the only thing that mattered when we went to bed was us. Because it would be someone, as I was rising through the ranks of one of the businesses, um, I I remember I was at a conference in Switzerland, and my country manager at the time, who I reported to, said to me, to the British team, and this was a global company, keep your head down. We don't like to cause any ruptions at all, okay? Don't cause a stir, because the business was very profitable, and that was slightly leaned on, and not really loved by the parent company, because who wants to make a profit in a subsidiary? Because then you have to pay loads of tax. So they didn't really like that this British division was very successful. So, country manager, keep your head down. Don't say anything. Don't answer a question. We don't want anyone to see us. Okay. Right. That's the rules. So we're sitting in this huge conference in Switzerland. And I hadn't been in the company that long, but I'd taken over the retail division. And I had a retail background. So it was pretty good. I mean, not the best, but it was pretty good. And anyway, keeping my head down, because who's seen that, right? So he starts as the owner of the company that sadly passed away now, but for a global brand, stood on the stage and said, I'm talking to all of you grey men. And to be fair, he wasn't wrong. There's one person who I'm going to call up. I want to know if she's here. And I'm thinking, oh, I wonder who that is. Because she's going to tell you how to run your businesses. I'm like, oh, this is exciting. I wonder who that's going to be. It's Hannah Moore from Great Britain. My country manager looks at me and goes, and I'm thinking, oh my God, oh my God. He's going, like,
I didn't say
Matthew.
nothing. I didn't say nothing.
And so the mic starts to travel. She's there. Where is she? Where is she? She's there. She's there. The mic travels back to me. He went, oh no, I need her up here. I don't want her on the mic. So I do the death march because I've got the eyes of the United Kingdom boring holes in my back. I've now got this sea of grey men who've been told I'm about to tell them how to run their businesses. How lovely. As I'm marched on stage by the owner of the company. He sits me down. My face is now beamed across the entire auditorium. Tell them how to run their businesses. Because if you came to Great Britain, you'd see how it's done. So anyway, as you can imagine, I didn't feel great. I passed, I got through, and I was never forgiven. That evening, because as I left the stage, the owner said, I want to clone her. I don't want any more of you. I want more of her. Great. Thank you. Thank you. So somebody came up to me and said, you'd be quite well to remember this. Don't believe your own PR. And it stuck with me for life, you know. That kind of someone who dropped me right back to, if I was ever going to think I was anything, if I thought I was there for glory or was ever going to start patting myself on the back going, good job, he struck me right down there and then. And so it stayed with me in a way that when I was being picked up, traveling first class, being picked up by limos, taken to where I was going, I never overbelieved. I never started to preen. I never started to go, oh, well, it's only because I deserve it. I always felt I needed to work hard to keep it and to keep working hard to make sure that they knew that I never slacked. If anything, I kept working harder. And I suppose ultimately, when you come down to what becomes most important on all of that, when you're being picked up by a car and you're being taken to, and you've flown in nicely, not in the back of the bus, and it would be so easy to look in the mirror and think, oh, how wonderful I am. And it would, right? And I think it does. People get carried away. But remember, don't believe your own PR. So it never happened to me, ever. But also the grassroots of where we come from. I didn't grow up with money. We didn't have anything. So ultimately, the most important thing when all of that is happening around us is my family. Nothing else. Because honestly, you could take it all away and I will put a roof over their heads and I will make sure they're okay. Because that's the only thing that matters.
Yeah, I love that. And look, the thing about it is, if you think about all of the people that you've developed relationships with across your entire life, most people, and I don't think a lot of people understand this, most people have a ton of acquaintances, a very few close friends, and a very small number of family members who truly care about you. And I say family and relatives are different. I don't include everyone in the same group simply because we share the same bloodline. Family are the people who have your back no matter what. And like I have three sons and my wife and I have been together for 33 years and I tell like and my wife is girly, like she's feminine. She's a great person. She's also really pretty and feminine, but she's also one of the toughest people I've ever met in my life. And I would not qualify that with gender. She is one of the toughest people, period, male or female, that I've ever met in my life. And my sons all have kind of a similar edge that I have. And so they're tough and can be nasty. Like my wife has mean in her, but she doesn't have nasty like I have in me. But I know if it came down to it, if somebody attacked a house with the five of us in it, they would not win. They would not go well for them or whatever group of people did it. That's what I consider family. And simply because you're related to someone doesn't mean that they care about you the way that they should care about you. And you have to be able to discern who those people are and give them a different amount of importance in your life. And if you don't think that the people at your work who claim to value you and claim to really appreciate what you do wouldn't replace you in a heartbeat if you drop dead, you're kidding yourself. You're just
Yes.
kidding yourself. And you've got to keep that in perspective. I think Hannah's story illustrates that beautifully, which is why I spend so much time talking about it right
Yeah,
now.
but you're right. You're so right. Like you only need three friends. Honestly, you do. Which three people? In fact, you're lucky if you have three people who you could
Mm,
call at 3 o'clock in the morning. If the chips were down, your house is being invaded, the sky falls down. Who do you call? They're your friends. They're your friends, and it doesn't have to be blood relations. They're your friends, and they're your deepest relatives in that way. Family, as you say, family doesn't have to be blood, and you don't need more. And don't be fixated by having hundreds of friends. They're not real. They're not real. The real ones are the ones you can call at 3 o'clock in the morning.
yeah. And look, I'm the CEO of our company. And so just because of the title, there's lots of people that treat me very differently because of the role that I have. And I'm under no illusions that any of those people would give a shit about me next week if I was fired or dropped dead. They'd be whoever the next person is, man or woman that took my spot, they'd be treating them the same exact way that they treat me. So I agree with the don't get above, don't believe your own press. Like it's not true. And so I'm fortunate. I played baseball, and I know you don't have a lot of baseball in the UK, but
More,
um,
a lot more than we did.
yeah, it's a sport that's filled with failure, which is that's why I allude to it a lot. So, a hitter that hits, it's called hitting 300. That means you fail 7 out of 10 times. That's what hitting 300 means. Because every 10 times at bat, you get 3 hits. That means you don't get hit seven of the time, seven times. And so that they pay you 30 million bucks a year to fail 7 out of 10 times. That's the job. And I was a pitcher, and it's not much better as a pitcher. You fail a lot, but that failure develops a fortitude in you, and they teach you as you kind of continue to climb the ladder in that game. And I had a chance to play professionally, so I was, a higher level than a lot of people ever participate in sports. And they teach you that you actually want to kind of be right here all the time, no matter what, because let's just stick with hitting for a second. So I just talked about hitting 300. And so that means if you have a 20 game stretch, it's a long season. They play 162 games. Um, if you have a stretch of 20 games where you hit 500, like nobody hits over more than 300. There's been hundreds of years of players who have played, and it always comes back to 300. So that means that if you have a stretch of 20 games where you're hitting 500, at some point you're going to go through a stretch of 20 games where you're hitting 100 because you're going to wind up at 300. That's
Sure.
just how it works. And you need to be the same guy at 500 as you are when you're hitting 100. And that's not
Yeah.
an easy thing to do because when you have the what I call the anti-Midas touch, and everything you touch turns to shit the minute you touch it, it can be very difficult to mentally continue to push forward and have a belief in yourself. And it's the same in life. It's funny how life will pile shit on you. And like you talked about, 2019 was so good and everything's going to be great. And then you had your feeling at the end of 2019. And I guess we got to blame the pandemic on you, right, Hannah?
Yeah,
It
it's
had to be.
me. I did it. Yes. Only I thought it was going to be a good thing, right? So I got that wrong. Maybe dunk me. Maybe do dunk me, right?
Oh my goodness. What what was, I'm not looking for sordid details, but what was some of the stuff that after your father passed away, and people were sitting around the newsroom going, this fucking lady can't be as good as she's presenting herself to be. We got to find something. We got to knock her down a peg or two. What were some of the things they tried to do or wrote about you, or how'd they attack your character?
um,
I think it's very interesting.
yeah, it was, I suppose, ultimately the story they wanted to tell was, wouldn't it be probable if she had her hand in the till?
Mm.
in the cash register. And so how can you raise 40 million without taking some? And what was so ridiculous about that is that, as anyone knows with a donation platform, we didn't get it. We were just the conduits. We were the mouthpieces. The money went through Just Giving, the platform, to the charity that was nominated. So factually, it couldn't have happened, but it didn't stop them from writing a good story or innuendo. It was always an innuendo, a twisting of,
Yeah.
always around. I would do things. So I was working with I won't say the brand names, but let's say I was working with a business that was awarding community awards. I was paid to do that, and I donated money to charity. So suddenly, why is she being paid? Why isn't charity getting all of it?
Mm.
She's raised 40 million, so why should she need to be paid? Suddenly, this whole what because I raised 40 million, I now don't need a
Yeah.
job.
Yeah. You can't earn a living, right?
Can't earn a living now because I'm charity now. So everything I touched became there she is, twisting, making money again. And that's why that woman said to me, the thing is, and she was on my side, like she's the good person. We love them. But she was trying to work out like what's making them do it apart from clickbait. Because maybe we just thought you were baking Victoria sponge cakes. Maybe that's what it is. I think people are so flabbergasted and so bemused, but it is our press, it is our national press, and it made there's no story in me being nice, is there? Once my father had died, where was the story in me being just an ordinary, nice, decent person earning a living, bringing up a family? Because I'd been at the forefront, they wrote everywhere that I was in PR. Um, and not to be anti-PR to PR people, but I've never been in PR. Like,
Right.
it's not who I am. I am not a marketing person. I'm not a PR person. Never been in it. Those departments reported to me over the years, but I've never been in them. And so almost like it was a slur. She's PR. She's got her own PR company. That's why. And so ultimately it came down to we raised so much money. How could I possibly not do the right thing? I must have done the wrong thing.
Yeah, sure.
That's what they wanted to tell. And it makes a great headline. And of course, you understand clickbait, and in our mainstream media, is as soon as anyone clicked, all the adverts all around. So I became profitable for them. It
Sure.
took me a long time to rationalize that, right? But our life has changed monumentally because wherever I travel, people recognize me. And that is really bizarre because I still don't feel that way. Someone said to me, do you know you're really well known now? You're like kind of famous. And I said, well, I don't know. I don't know what the emotion of fame is, but I don't have it. It doesn't live here. Because I've someone's forgotten to tell me what it feels like because I don't feel like it. Because I'm just me. I'm getting up in the morning, I'm feeding the dogs, I'm clearing up the poop if there is, I'm clearing up the sick if there is, and I'm still marshalling dinner if everyone's at home, and I'm putting the kettle on, making tea, going to work. So there's nothing else that lives here in this person apart from the things that have happened in my life. And I've just come to terms with it's okay. They can write whatever they like about me. I'm going to let them. And the joy for me is that I'll jump in a cab in London, a taxi in London, and the cabbers will go, all right, love, my mum loves you. And I land like I flew into Italy, and a woman came to our house to help us make pizza. And she was like, Dai, Anna, Capitan Tom, no? Capitan Tom. And so, like, it happens, but it doesn't change me. I am just me. living with life after raising 40 million pounds and the bizarreness of it. But I've come a long way, and I have real balance about it all. And the truth is that I now think, oh my goodness, what else is there? Like, I'm at a point in my life where I feel so lucky. I feel so lucky that I can see so many positive things to do. And yes, my old life is kind of gone. My old business life is gone. I can't go back. But there's a lesson in life. It's okay. Don't stop trying to recap, bring back something that's gone. Accept it is. Move on. Like, I'm reinventing myself. I'm doing new things. I'm writing books, and you'll see behind me, I'm about to launch my own podcast, which I can't wait for you to be my guest on. And I'm in a new world, and I'm loving it.
So I was going to ask you about more moments since you talked about it. And by the way, anytime you're ready, you let me know. I'd love to be a guest on your podcast. But what are you going to focus on? What are you doing your podcast on?
Thank you for giving that just a few minutes. I decided through all of the things that happened, I'm going to backstop that a bit. I never thought I'd do a podcast, never thought I'd write a book, because who am I to podcast? What do I know? Like, you've got good stuff to talk about, and what do I know about podcasting? There's a plethora of them. And then somebody said to me, yeah, but you're a good listener, and I think people would like to tell you their story. So it kind of started from there. And one interview that I did, the interviewer, a bit very similar to how you've done today as a presenter, said, this is your story, you tell it. I'm not judging it. I just want you to tell it. And through that, and from when we first listened, talked to each other, it's really formulated. So it's more moments, sharing remarkable stories, from kitchen tables to boardrooms to red carpets, because everybody has a remarkable story to tell. And I want to do exactly what you've done today. Give people a platform to tell their own. We have some very interesting guests lined up. You, of course, as someone who caused eruptions in political life here, and was doing something actually quite good, was castigated for it, and life almost destroyed, but has survived and is doing really well. So I've got some twists, and it is exactly like you've had guests who should be given a platform, who should be allowed to speak and tell their life in a way that, in a traditional mainstream media way, it would never be told, right? That's what I want to do.
I love that. That sounds so cool. And the thing I will tell you, and I think we talked about this in our initial conversation, like all the listeners, I'm not a touchy-feely guy. All the listeners know I'm not touchy-feely in any way, shape, or form. However, I find it super interesting that I enjoyed doing this podcast so much and hearing about people's stories and how they've figured out how to navigate their lives in successful ways, because I am a big believer in just the human spirit and a big believer in finding a way and just scratching and fighting and clawing and do whatever you have to do to build a life that works for you. And there's no right answer to it. And it's fascinating to me to hear people's stories and how they navigated their life, and how a series of seemingly unconnected events or inconsequential at the time events led to such profound things down the road in people's lives. And I love doing the podcast, even though my real job is in the grocery business. I learn so much from it, and it's so valuable and rewarding. I'll be shocked if you don't get a ton out of doing your podcast. So, plus you're going to be a great host because you are a great listener, and you've just got, such a captivating personality, and you're such a good storyteller. And I can't wait. I'll be a subscriber and a guest, and I'm looking forward to it.
Great, great, thank you. And honestly, I think I just truly love your no nonsense. I don't know where your subscribers are. We haven't, that's a whole conversation I need to tap you about subscribers and where they come from. And how important it is for people who are listening to actually please do subscribe to this podcast and comment and engage. It's really important because there's information that you'll find on podcasts like this that you just won't find anywhere else. It's not going to be told to you through the mainstream media outlets. In fact, I think people around the world are becoming very distrustful of mainstream media. People are looking for another source of life stories, another source of life lessons, another sort of way to take on their news and lifestyle programming. So there's a massive place for podcasts like this. So please do subscribe to Salty. Please do comment, and please engage with the community. I think that means a lot to us both.
Couldn't agree more. And yeah, it's I think it's good that people are distrustful of the mainstream media because it was captured by profit probably about 30 years ago,
Yeah.
and it's been very dishonest. It could have been even before that, but I noticed it about 30 years ago. And it's continued to be less and less honest and less impartial, which I don't have any problem with so long as they tell you up front, I'm not impartial. I am slanted towards X, Y, or Z. I'm fine with that. Just tell me what you are. It's
Tell me.
okay. Yeah, that's all. That's okay.
Yeah, well, you just have to look at us politically, geographically. The world is all a bit confused right now. And you think when I grew up, the world was not at peace. There's no question it wasn't at peace. But it was not at peace in a way that was easier to understand. Now we're not at peace for lots of complicated reasons. And do you know what really saddens me? And again, maybe this is for another time, that conversations with friends of mine around the world never, ever, ever used to be political, ever.
Mm.
No one ever talked about it, accepting that your political opinion was something you held over here with religion, probably, and other things. Don't put them on the table. Always, I was told, don't talk about politics or religion. And so the thing is, those things have crept onto the table. And now I see in America, and I'm sure this happens elsewhere, that if you are one side of the political spectrum, you now don't necessarily talk to the neighbor who you did like, who's on the opposite side of that political spectrum. How did we let that happen? How did we let the people with political power shape our relationships? Because we're letting that happen, by the way. I'm not blaming them. I'm looking at us. How did we make that political view more important? I don't understand it. I think it can't stay like this, by the way, because it's got to find another way. I think life does work in cycles. And this is definitely for another podcast, isn't it? Because it's not this one. But
No, this is I love it. And yes, we will talk about it on another podcast, but it brings to mind two quotes, and I couldn't remember the second one. But the first one, your comments, I agree with them 100%. Um, uh, Hard times create tough men. And I'm using the word men. Everyone can say their misogyny.
yeah,
I'm talking about people. Hard times create tough men. Tough men create good times. Good times create soft men. Soft men create hard times. So there's a cycle to it,
yes,
is my point.
yes.
And when you talk about people who, and it has nothing to do with how I feel about a particular subject,
Mhm.
but when you hear people on the internet crying about being misgendered, I don't fucking care. That's not a real problem. You don't have a real problem. Right now, there's kids in Afghanistan diving into caves so they don't get hit by a fucking drone strike. I don't give a shit that someone called you he when you want to be called she. I don't care at all. Nobody does. It's not a problem. Shut the fuck up, get a job, do something productive. But we as a society have had it so good for so long. We've allowed those things to be portrayed like they're actually real problems, and they are not. There's never been a better time to be a human being than right now. There's more people in the world above the poverty level than ever before. Life expectancy around the world is higher than it's been ever before. The amount of global conflict is lower than it's ever been before. And I'm talking about throughout human history.
Yes.
So if people don't understand that perspective, that's on them. You can read a
Yeah.
history book. It's not that hard. And so I don't feel bad for those people, and I don't give them any license to sit and whine and bitch and moan, because there's never been a better time to be a human being than right now. Never.
Never. And you know what, and again, this we're straying a little bit. It's fascinating and I love it. But they're we're in danger, us in our fledgling democracies, of losing them
Mhm.
because we become sleepy. And those who want to rock democracy are sitting there waiting for us all to fall asleep because life's just a bit too comfortable, and we're just used to the state taking care of things. And as we allow our state to creep ever bigger, then the people start to go, it's not really my decision. I don't really have a point of view on that because the state is deciding for me. And guess what happens then? If we stop voting, if we stop making decisions, if we stop doing all the things that we've been given the right to do, democracy stops being democracy. And people are asleep at the wheel. And maybe that's what needs to happen. But as I said, we're straying, and it's probably not where we need to be tonight.
That's okay. We'll pick it up. We'll pick it up another time. But yeah, Hannah, thank you so much for coming on. I absolutely loved your story. I thank you so much for sharing it with the audience. We will definitely have you back on Salty Ginger Talk. And when you get more moments going and you're looking for a guest, please do reach out because I'd be happy to come on and talk about anything you want to talk about.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you again. Thank you to all of the listeners. I hope we didn't make you fall asleep. That I hope that you found some really engaging content because I've loved being here and talking to you, Joe. Really, really loved it. So thank you very much for inviting me. And definitely I'd love to come back because there's a lot of other stuff we can talk about. I'm already thinking, wouldn't it be really good if you had two guests? Wouldn't
Yeah.
that be cool?
Mhm.
Like if that would be so good. You sort of make a panel and I've see, stop it.
We have a lot. We have a lot
Yeah.
to talk about in the future. It's the beginning. It's like Casablanca. It's the beginning of a beautiful relationship,
I
right?
think so. I think so. So thank you very much again. I really appreciate the time.
Thank you, Hannah. And go cool off a little bit. Hopefully it cools
Oh my
down.
goodness, ridiculous. But it's all right. It's dropping by 10 degrees tomorrow. We wouldn't like the British weather to be stable or anything, would we?
Yeah, right. Isn't that the old saying? If you don't like the weather in Britain, just wait 10 minutes.
Just wait 10 minutes, it will change.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Thank you so much, Hannah. Really
Thank you so
appreciate it.
much.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Have a great night.
Bye. Good night. Bye-bye.
Okay, guys, like we said, a pretty wild story. And you let me know if you have raised almost $40 million in 4 weeks. And if you haven't, it's tough to beat a story like Hannah's. And then to have, have the media kind of come after and look for a chink in the armor or a fly in the ointment or some type of malfeasance. It just goes to show you how cynical people can be. But love her positive energy, love how her life centers around family and the people closest to her. Wildly successful in the business world, never lost sight of the things that are truly important. Talked about the difficulty of her losing her mom to dementia and the crazy story about her dad becoming a global phenomenon with his raising money with his walking during COVID and almost losing her husband out of the blue. So super interesting, super captivating. Love that More Moments is going to be a podcast. She will be a great podcast host. Really neat lady. Really glad she came on and just really honored that she was able to give us the time that she gave us. So thanks again, Hannah. And it won't be the last time you see Hannah on Salty Ginger Talk. Can't wait to bring her back on. So James puts it up right over here every day. Head over to our website, saltygingertalk.com. All of our podcast episodes are available there. Links to our social media accounts are available there. And we publish a newsletter every weekday that you can subscribe to on our website as well. And please like, share, comment, subscribe. to the podcast on whatever platform you consume it on. Super helpful for us. We're going to keep finding awesome people. We're going to keep bringing them on the channel. They're going to keep giving you great advice and tips and ways that you can improve your life and ways to improve your thought process. You don't want to miss it. Make sure you catch the next episode. We will see you there.